Fáilte, and welcome to this video where we're going to talk about the First Cut signature blend from Two Stacks. In the ever-present Two Stacks spirit of transparency, you can see the 5 circles here that call out the component parts of this blended whisky. Now, I consider these circles to be an Irish whisky history timeline of sorts. So we've touched on grain whisky with the first whisky that we talked about, link above and below. Think corn and column still. And here we have 40% single grain that's aged in virgin oak casks, and we've got another 40% single grain that's aged in ex-bourbon casks. So again, going back to the grain whisky, we know that the column still and corn have been an important part of Irish whisky since the mid-1800s. Then we go to the third component, 8% pot still, aged in ex-Oloroso sherry butts. Pot still is Irish whisky's gift to the world of whisky, a style of whisky which we are credited with creating. The romantic story goes back to the malt tax of 1785 when the British decided to tax the use of malted barley, and the Irish, being the Irish, said, well, sure, if you're going to tax our malted barley, we'll use some unmalted barley in the mash as well. There's frankly much more to the pot still story than that, and pot still whisky in Ireland has evolved over the years. In modern terms, we consider it to be a mash of malted and unmalted barley, but historically and very importantly, other grains were part of the mash bills of pot still Irish whisky. And oats, wheat and rye were all used back in the day. Current Irish whisky legislation is based on a 30-35 formula where the mash bill has to contain a minimum of 30% malted barley and 30% unmalted barley and can have no more than 5% of those other grains. Pot still whisky brings depth, texture and a rich, oily and spicy mouthfeel to the blend. Now we head into the malt whisky components of this. What's wonderful about malt whisky is pretty much every whisky producing country around the world makes a malt whisky. So it allows us a benchmark to compare whiskies of a similar style made with 100% malted barley against each other. In our blend we've got 10% double malt, which is double distilled malt whisky aged in ex-bourbon casks. More proof, if you need it, that not every Irish whisky is triple distilled. Then we come to the final component in this blended whisky, which often takes some people by surprise, and that's 2% peated malt whisky, again aged in bourbon casks. So I call this a kiss of peat, a whisper of peat, and some people describe it as a seasoning of sorts. Think of this as when you cook yourself a nice steak, or for me a nice rack of lamb, and you get it to that perfect medium rare. Then when I cut it into those yummy lamb lollipops, I like to sprinkle a little Maldon sea salt onto it to lift the flavour from the meat. Think of the peated malt in this blended whisky as doing that. It lifts all of the other flavours. Again, going back to the history timeline, historically in Ireland we would have used peat as a heat source in homes in the 1700s and into the early to mid 1800s. This peat was cut from the bog and it was used to warm homes, to cook food over, and it was used to malt the grains that ultimately went into whisky. So historically in Ireland, and we don't talk about this a lot, but a lot of our whiskies were peated a couple of hundred years ago. As we know, our friends in Scotland now carry that mantle, but the 2% peated malt that we use in this blend is a little bit of a tip of the hat to a part of our history that not a lot of people know about. I honestly am a big fan of this whisky in spirit-forward cocktails, so think old-fashioned. Think of a Manhattan with that kiss of peat. But I also think this is fantastic in an Irish coffee. I find that the 2% peated malt component plays really, really nicely with the coffee in an Irish coffee, and I'll share my Irish coffee recipe below. The First Cut Signature Blend from Two Stacks is offered here in the US at 43% ABV, 86 proof, and is available in both the 100ml green Dram in a Can format and in 700ml bottles. Sláinte.